Monsoon winds continue to lash northern India this week, and while the mountains struggle with devastating floods, cities on the lowland and the coast are inundated. It wasn't so long ago that our cities were struggling with drinking water shortages under a sweltering summer sun, and though our unpreparedness for climate change becomes more apparent every year, the fact is that unreliable weather isn't new to the subcontinent. So here's how three of the most important medieval metropolises, Vijayanagara, Bijapur and Fatehpur Sikri, managed the challenges of inclement weather. The great cities of contemporary India, think Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, have all grown rapidly in the last century due to internal migration. In the colonial period and after, resources and jobs have been concentrated in states' capitals with much fewer opportunities available in the rural hinterland. So, Indians seeking to climb the socioeconomic ladder can either make do with what our cities offer, which isn't much, or they can leave. Civic infrastructure doesn't drive internal migration. But this wasn't the case through most of Indian history, especially the latter part of the medieval period from 1400 to 1600 CE. During this time, states began to transition to the use of gunpowder and developed rudimentary bureaucracies. Technology was harnessed to expand cultivation into dry climates, and seeking talented labor, rulers went out of their way to ensure that urban centers offered the chance for a good life. Arguably, the most successful in this was Vijayanagara, or present-day Hampi, which was nestled along the rocky courses of the Tungabhadra River. With an estimated population of 3 lakh to 4 lakh people, Vijayanagara was second only in Beijing in size for its time. It easily dwarfed London and Paris. In the irrigation and water supply systems of Vijayanagara, historian Dominic J. Davison Jenkins argues, based on inscriptions and travelers' accounts, that the kings of Vijayanagara were considered responsible for ensuring the city's access to water. Vijayanagara was in the dry interior of the Deccan on soils that had very poor water retention abilities. In previous centuries, smaller settlements in the region had figured out how to build modest catchment tanks for rainwater, digging channels that hugged contours and gathered runoff from the bouldery hills. The military campaigns of Vijayanagara kings gave them the resources to expand these to hitherto unimagined scales. In her paper Supplying the City, the Role of Reservoirs in Indian Urban Landscape, archaeologist Kathleen D. Morrison notes that reservoirs around Vijayanagara ranged in size from 2 meters to 3 kilometers long, and the highest embankment was 28 meters high, which is taller than some apartment buildings today. Now, Davison Jenkins also makes particular note of Vijayanagara inscriptions linked to reservoirs. One of the most elaborate, dating to the 15th century, mentions the need for a Brahmin learned in hydrology and a dam made of stone with sluices to control eddies and turbulence. It also warns against the risks of over-silting and salinity. Enormous resources were dedicated to building tanks like this. According to the Portuguese traveler Fernando Paes, one royal project employed nearly 20,000 people. And as irrigation spread further inland from the river banks, powerful lords and temples also invested in tank building, expanding the cultivable area. But this also meant that a lot of the construction was based on practical engineering and rule of thumbs, requiring frequent repairs and reinvestment. Morrison notes that towering sluices which control the flow of water were carved with likenesses of tank investors. As an annual return, these investors could also expect cultivators to pay them a share of the crops. A good chunk of Vijayanagara's water systems was essentially crowdfunded. As Morrison puts it, in this way, small donations or investments were pooled to finance irrigation works requiring large capital outlays, and even very large-scale agricultural facilities could be constructed without either centralized initiative or control. Not only were the rights and obligations of cultivators and investors shared, but so were the risks. For an investment in public infrastructure, families could be guaranteed a share of harvests of different crops from multiple villages, which was a remarkably climate resilient arrangement. Now, in comparison to the vast and complex irrigation system, Vijayanagara's municipal water systems were somewhat limited. Davison Jenkins' fieldwork found that the majority of the city's water facilities, fountains, aqueducts, piping, channels, were focused in its royal center. Some temples had large reservoirs which must have fulfilled some of the city's drinking water requirements, but otherwise communities had to maintain their own small rainwater tanks. Now, this was in a marked contrast to Vijayanagara's rival Bijapur, the seat of a sultanate of the same name. In the paper you can see on your screen, scholar Klaus Rodzer writes that Bijapur's kings invested in cutting-edge water management technology from Iran, including hydraulic lime mortar, sophisticated locking systems for barrages, and the Kanat, an underground channel with regular vertical shafts serving as wells. The Bijapur sultans also took care to build baolis or step wells in the city's most crowded neighborhoods, which were accessible to all, though of course the palaces got the best systems. Now, after a long period of neglect, the restoration of these step wells in 2022 rejuvenated the city's access to year-round drinking water. The Deccan Heritage Foundation has also worked on the restoration of other historic water systems in the region, including the Kanat at nearby Bidar. Now, we're so often preoccupied with the military competition between Vijayanagara and the Sultanates that we forget that the cities also competed in their water facilities and sought to attract the best engineering talent. Medieval Bijapur's hydraulic experts were able to work out the pressure exerted by water on the base of their reservoirs. They built angled bunds that took up much less material and resources, and by controlling water pressure, they could easily desilt their canals. Finally, the use of vaulted roofs and mortar made construction much more cost-effective than in Vijayanagara. Bijapur's quality infrastructure made it a very attractive immigration destination. Its court included talent from as far away as Armenia and Ethiopia, which in turn fed into its political and military success. Now, while Vijayanagara's crowd-funded canal system was much more extensive and productive, it was irregular and it required continuous manual labor for desilting, and it was subject to disastrous leaks. In fact, the Raya Canal, which was built at great cost in the 16th century, was never actually used because of issues with its bund. In contrast, Bijapur's mortar-lined engineered kanats, on the other hand, efficiently channeled water to its urban stepwells, but its agrarian hinterland was nowhere near as rich as Vijayanagara's. But in many ways, the greatest beneficiary of all these developments was the Mughal Empire, which by the late 16th century was becoming the subcontinent's dominant power. Historian S.A. Rizvi notes that Fatullah Shirazi, an engineer resident at the Bijapur court, had moved to the new Mughal capital, Fatehpur Sikri, by 1582. As it happens, the names of all these medieval capitals meant City of Victory: Bijapur, Vijayanagara, Fatehpur. By ordering a nearby valley closed off and flooded, the Mughal Emperor Akbar created a vast reservoir on the city's shore, which served the needs of its people and animals. Historian Syed Ali Nadeem Rizvi, in his Fatehpur Sikri Revisited, describes extensive systems of rainwater harvesting integrated into its Jama Masjid complex, as well as the tomb of Sheikh Salim Chishti. Underground channels funneled water into storage tanks. The most elaborate waterworks, which were on the northern side of the city, used water wheels and an elaborate pulley system to raise water uphill to the palaces. And though Fatehpur Sikri is popularly believed to have been abandoned due to water shortages, Rizvi shows that there's very little evidence of this in Mughal court records. In fact, the city was extraordinarily well provided with water. Its gradual decline and abandonment was due to political shifts in the 17th century. Medieval cities did have one major benefit that contemporary cities do not: much smaller populations. On the other hand, the technological possibilities of today would have been completely unimaginable to medieval hydraulic engineers. My colleague archaeologist Disha Eluwalia has pointed out that the pre-modern cities of the Indus Valley civilization took care not to interfere with natural drainage systems while also rigorously maintaining their own water supply and drainage. While hydraulic engineering will be key to making more climate-resilient cities today, the more fundamental challenge will be in urban planning and in responsible custodianship of wetlands and water resources. So, what can we learn from these medieval cities? Beneath all this engineering is the political economy of water, of community stewardship as in the Vijayanagara hinterland, of political commitment to water provision as at Bijapur and Fatehpur, but most importantly, the relationship between citizens and the state. Until political fortunes depend on well-heeled and educated citizens demanding quality civic infrastructure, we can only look forward to the next year's monsoon disasters and summer droughts. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. Follow us everywhere on social media. You can find me on Instagram at @Buddha and on Twitter at @Kanisati. We'll see you next week.